you were just doing. Let me put the
Meeting some hackers.
This has been awesome.
Good to see you. Yeah.
Good to see you too. A little bit of an intro for the stream, so they know who you are and what you do.
So I'm Javi. I'm a doctor by training. Did one too many night shifts and sort of figured there must be a better way.
A better way to spend my time in medicine.
And then from there, ended up. I've always been a big software nerd, and so ended up trying to fix healthcare through software at a number of different funds. And now I work at Sofinnova, which is Europe's largest life science fund, and actually specifically I work in the digital medicine fund, which invests in sort of how AI and bio come together, how compute and healthcare can kind of mix to hopefully solve some of the big problems that we have in our
That is such a broad, such a large intersection.
Yeah, for sure.
Your favorite words in the world. Compute and healthcare.
Yeah.
Explain.
So, the problem I think that we have is that like compute is not, healthcare in and of itself doesn't scale. Right, so you have to train doctors. It takes years and years and years.
Right,
and we just don't have enough of them. Mm-hmm. And so, what if we, rather than using sort of pure medical expertise to solve healthcare problems, we started using something way more scalable, like throwing compute at it. And now, with new reasoning models, with new AIs, with new sort of bio-foundation models that can like represent biology.
Who's building bio-foundation models?
Some of our portfolio companies, not to plug them too heavily.
Plug them right now.
Companies like Bioptimus, right? Okay. They're finally building like a biological simulator in a sense, using the same architectures we use for ChatGPT, but trained on RNA, DNA, proteins, rather than language. Companies like Latent Labs, they're doing that, but for proteins, right? So how do you build drugs that actually do what you want in the body? And the idea is that makes the sort of the biology no longer need to be reductionist. You can just simulate it in a computer and hopefully get to a point where you don't have to have the failure rates that we see in making drugs or in delivering care. And so hopefully you can scale healthcare better than you could before.
I've never thought I'd hear the words we can scale healthcare. Obviously in the UK we have the NHS. Yeah. It's deeply flawed, but at the same time is one of the cornerstones of our society, right? And there's this constant conversation around upgrading it over the years, so many different figures around how much it costs. But it feels like with this and the way that you're talking about it, there's a path to a future where actually there is a bit more of a seamless process in healthcare.
I think that's exactly the way we're looking at it, and we should be excited about sort of the point we're at right now. And I think if you asked me 5 years ago, right, like where's this all going to go? I'd say, look, software is going to be needed, but it's hard to see how you get there, right? I think now, like we're seeing some models that outperform a lot of the doctors themselves, and so we should be using these technologies in a safe way. We should regulate them, all the caveats aside. This is the first time we can actually address this big problem.
When, for you, did you quite understand that AI and the models were actually going to change the direction of how we think about healthcare?
I think everyone had the ChatGPT moments, right, when they started playing with it and they said, holy moly, this thing's doing what we think it does.
But okay, so for a GP as an example, I'm going to use the UK kind of concept here. For them, it's sort of like I can quickly write up my notes. That was a really low-hanging fruit. Where does it go from there?
It's a great question. So, like you said, Scribe's booming across the whole world, right? I think the reality is that Scribe process is really collecting the data stream of what's happening between doctor and patient. And so you can use that to say, well, what if I now start supporting the doctor in making decisions? Right. I don't just record what you say. I say, hey, here's the right treatment options. Maybe I base that on local guidelines that I have. Then the next step is, hey, I know you're going to order all these tests. I know you're going to prescribe these drugs. I filled it all out for you. So you review, you make sure as a doctor that you're prescribing the right thing, but 3 clicks and you're done. And so I think it's going from data capture and sort of low-grade automation to actions on a computer that are driving some of the healthcare decisions. And I think in the long term, who knows, we might get to a point where this thing is doing the low-level, low-risk care itself with, safeguards to make sure that if things get out of hand, the doctor gets involved, but otherwise it's just the machine. And I think we're in a world where that's not impossible.
That's really cool. I'm thinking in my head right now, what's going through it is sort of like Amazon's one click. It's like, how do we get to that for a doctor?
Right.
But at the same time, not take away that human element where the AI is making the decision to do something.
Totally.
Like blurred lines, right?
Yeah, but here's the interesting stat, right? If you look at whether LLM, so if you take a patient and you blind them to whether they're talking to an LLM, an AI, or a doctor, they actually find the LLM more empathetic on average.
Really?
And the reason is because the doctor's always time constrained, right? I don't know, last time you went to your GP?
Yep, no, he was time constrained. It's
6 minutes deep, they're looking at the thing and trying to kick you out, right? The LLM will explain.
And is that across the board in Europe as well?
Yeah, so this was some European data, some American data. Just the reality is there's so much pressure. The doctors, all the will in the world, they just need to get through the list. And the LLM doesn't. And so that means that if you look at most of the early data, it suggests the patients are, in a sense, more enjoying the time constrained interaction with the model.
Do you see a world where there's sovereignty for the individual around their healthcare data? And so you almost have a data passport that you can go from country to country with.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of efforts in that direction. I think what we're seeing now is that because we have ChatGPT, because people are putting their healthcare data in it, you're seeing more and more people take ownership over like, yeah, I'm going to go to my doctor, but actually I want an opinion from this set of systems that I use in my everyday life and help me make decisions in other parts of my life that aren't just healthcare. To go from there to like my data lives on this, I think there's still a few steps, but it definitely is causing more engagement of patients with their own health.
I mean, that's part of the point, right? Like that's what we wanted.
Right, it's abundance, right? It's the idea that like I can consume as much of the healthcare need as I feel I need, rather than as much as the system can give me. And that's the transition that I think we're starting to see, or at least that these systems are promising.
So how do you combat the problem of people just researching in ChatGPT or on the internet these days, getting false information, and then trying to, argue with their doctors, their real life doctors, their AIs, on like, I think this is the right thing to do. Like, it's super blurred in like what's the right thing for that patient, what is the right course of action.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about that? Is that a solved problem yet?
It certainly isn't. And I think we've always, like pre-ChatGPT, there was like the Dr. Google issue.
Yep.
Where people would go Google the symptoms.
Oh, dude, I've done the same.
Yeah, and everyone ends up like, I'm about to die.
I went to the GP and he was like, how did you fill out this form? I was like, it was Claude.
Yeah.
It's like, I really liked it. Can I get a referral?
and so I think we're actually moving to a better setup now, right? Where at least everyone doesn't come in being like, I've had 3 headaches, I think I have a brain tumor, right? Having said that, still we need to like ensure that we guide patients to medically responsible sources of information. And so I think we're not that far away from sort of a consumer grade healthcare specific version of it in OpenAI.
Clear.
Right? And that will be guardrailed. Maybe the performance across every use case won't be the same, but it's definitely not going to tell you that you have whatever, brain tumor when you have a headache, or vice versa, a headache when you have a brain tumor.
Perhaps Sofinnova, are you investing just in B2B SaaS or hardware as well?
So we, as a firm, we actually do, we have 7 different strategies, and they invest across biotech, medtech, the whole shebang. In the digital medicine fund, we primarily focus on software focused companies. We're not averse to the fact that like wet lab's important, and at the end of the day, we're an atoms business, right? Like we work on humans, and humans are made of things. But most of our innovation happens on the software side, if that makes sense.
What are you really excited about from a software perspective outside of just the scribe and the execution of agents?
So I think the ability to simulate biology for the first time is, I think, the most exciting.
That must be incredible.
We just couldn't do it, right? And clinical trials have like sub 10% success rates, right? And they cost $300 million to run. So you have to run 10 of them to get a drug out. It's not a good system, and it's getting, or it has historically gotten worse over time. If you can simulate biology before all that, and just move the needle from like a 10% success rate to a 20% success rate, the whole economics of the industry change. And at the end of the day, what you get is like better treatments for patients faster.
Clear.
And so that has ramifications all down the chain. And I think, some of the companies, not to shout out by Optimus again, but they're on the verge of being able to demonstrate this is possible. And I think we're on the verge of a step change in how the innovation industry, pharma, CROs, medtech, thinks about these technologies.
I don't want to get into the politics of big pharma, but there is a question here. The elephant in the room is, how do they adapt to this?
Yeah.
Do they end up just absorbing the companies because they have they have market share, they have abnormal amounts of capital at their disposal?
That's great.
Do they just swallow them up? And then it becomes sort of like a WPP situation in the marketing and media space where they can't work together consistently? So
it's a great question. I think we count a lot of pharmas as investors in our funds, right? And we have a lot of strategic relationships with them. I think by and large, the pharma is beginning to understand the importance of this. Some perhaps faster and with more resources than others. And I think they're starting to appreciate that this is going to change my innovation paradigm. Now, a lot of them are in the sort of build phase rather than buy phase. And I think in some cases there's an underappreciation of how technically complex this is to pull off in biology, right? This is not just taking hey, I know how this works in language and just throwing some genomic data in there. Like it's far more tricky than that. And so I think we're going to see this transition where the pharma companies will initially be like, well, I can build this myself. And then they'll perhaps hit some of the roadblocks that are challenging,
because they're not
and then end up
for software companies,
and then end up partnering and working with other players. But Eli Lilly just did a sort of a new initiative to actually create a data set and sort of model AI access for biotech companies where there'll be an exchange of sort of data for model. And so that's kind of a tech company sort of move.
Yep.
Right? And we didn't see pharma do that before. So I think we have some forerunners that are starting to just appreciate that there is an opportunity here and are starting to move. So I don't think we're going to get to a point where it's just going to be like pharma buys one company and keeps the channel and it all sort of stays as it was. I think there's going to be a shift in the market and a reorganization of winners and losers.
Speaking of shifts, Europe versus the US versus the Middle East, India, China. How do you see the landscape of medicine across all of them?
The landscape of medicine,
and how it's adapting to innovation.
I think that's a really good question. The US has historically been the largest sort of consumer of healthcare from a dollar perspective.
Agreed.
Right? And so that still is the case in many ways today. And if you look at where a lot of these scribes are being adopted, the biggest revenue growth is over in the US.
Clear.
Right? I think the big difference with like this new AI world is that we tell our LPs like this is happening kind of everywhere and all at once. So a stat I like, it took 3 years for 90% of ChatGPT users to come out from outside the US, versus I think if memory serves, it took 23 years for that to happen in the internet.
Okay.
And so there is a lot more adoption of this stuff outside of the US than there was before. And because it's kind of in many ways multilingual out of the box, right? You can talk to it in French and it responds in German if you needed to. I think it transcends a lot of European sort of cultural language barriers that historically keep healthcare from scaling. It doesn't mean that there isn't like regulatory and sort of system level differences between France and Germany and the UK. So I think those need to be bridged, but the technology itself kind of is cross-applicable, and we are starting to see very fast-growing European for Europe health tech companies that are just managing to scale very quickly. So I think there's an exciting kind of non-US opportunity here, or non-only US opportunity here. And I think we need to do it because the reality is that otherwise the innovation that ultimately will deflate the cost of care in Europe won't be here. And so there's a real need to adopt and to push it into our healthcare systems. Because frankly, I want good care when I'm older. I want my parents to have good care, right? And that's only going to happen if we adopt these sorts of technologies in our everyday.
Like you said earlier, in the business of atoms, right? And we're here at AI Engine. You're one of the partners that brought this to life. Great dinner yesterday as well. Those atoms in those food was
some good cheesecake atoms.
Some really good cheesecake atoms. Why is this so important? Like, get boots on the ground, actively sort of invest in people building technology, hacking together ideas. Do you see it as like, oh, this is pipeline for us, or do you see it as this is an opportunity to think outside the box?
I think there's a broader ecosystem thing to it, right? Like, yes, absolutely, meeting great talent is always helpful, but the reality is that, like, one analogy I like is that the waterline has come down on what you can build, and so we now don't know where the islands are anymore, right? There's new islands that are now above the waterline.
That's a really good metaphor.
And we need to send a bunch of boats out, right? People need to try stuff, and some of them.
These are the boats.
Yeah, right. Some of them won't come back, right? Sometimes the boat doesn't hit an island, but as we do that, I think we're going to find what works. And then, the reality is that I think for the average person, like understanding how to build a consumer app is sort of more intrinsically tangible, right?
Agreed.
But we're running our AI for Science track here, and the reason we're doing that is because I think it's worth giving people the space to think about, like, how would I apply this technology to learn quicker or to push the frontier of a new space? And so I think we want people to have those kinds of thoughts so they can say, hey, actually, you know what? I'm not going to build the next consumer agent. I'm going to build something for healthcare. I'm going to something for science, and I'm going to push in that direction. And so I think it's about also sending out the boats and hopefully in the direction of the healthcare and science islands, as well as the commerce and consumer islands.
Look, before we let you go, right, I'm sure you want to get back in there and understand what people are building. Quick lightning round, quick fire. What are you pessimistic about in Europe right now?
Geopolitical instability is something I'm personally worried about.
What are you optimistic about?
The people in that room building cool things.
What has to change for medicine and AI to really go through that step change at pace?
I think regulators need to understand that the system is not going to scale, and we need to lean in, not out, of these technologies.
And what do we collectively have to understand about medicine that's going to give it time to grow?
That at the end of the day, we're all going to need it, and we need to start working on it today, so that when we need it, as you know, I'm a 33-year-old guy, it is supporting and there. And I think we need to get to a stage where care is not scarce, but abundance. And I'd get the amount of care I would like to have, not the amount of care I can be delivered.
Do you think part of this scalability is the humanoids?
You mean like the physical AI?
Like physical AI and like
100%.
almost having a GP that is a humanoid that you can talk to and have a figure to go to?
It's a great. Yes, I think there's going to be some element, and then the next wave, the next frontier is going to be, how do I operate on a patient using an AI-enabled system, right? We have a company in Sofinnova called Moon Surgical. Surgical robotics platform. I think it's the first AI FDA approval for surgical robotics platform.
Incredible.
And yeah, that is the next frontier, because at the end of the day, this isn't Adam's business, and at some point I have to do something to someone, right? And that's only going to happen as these world models and these physical AI systems get good enough to interface with humans in a safe way. And if you're going to give a robot a sort of surgical scalpel, you better be sure that they know what they're doing, right?
Right. Last question. Obviously, you seem like a builder at heart, someone that loves technology. What's the one thing that you want built?
The one thing I want built?
Obviously, in the context of medicine and telehealth and health.
It's the same answer as before. I want my AI doctor, right?
I just want my GP.
I want my GP that I can call whenever I need, and it's there for me, and it's 2 a.m, and I just have a funny rash, and I want to be able to call him, and he'll pick up and act like it's 9 a.m.
Love it. Javi, pleasure.